So, good news everyone! I'm going to be talking about how one post on X caused a snowball of events that recently resulted in the Irish Parliament, I suppose, rejecting pressure from the EU to impose stricter hate speech laws. And I'm going to walk you through it. And this is some good moralisation because it shows one person on social media can draw attention to an issue. Lots of other commentators can then amplify that and say, listen, actually, this is a really big problem. And there's actually quite a good case for this being the origin point of the pushback, which snowballed into them saying, actually, maybe this is going to be quite unpopular. Let's not do that. So it's a nice bit of reassurance that you can sometimes have an impact. The fact I've never done a segment like this before in all of my 5 years of doing this, ignore that. But maybe this is an exception and not the rule. But it does seem to sometimes happen, which should give you hope. And that's what I want to do. So going all the way back to the 26th of April 2023 in the Dáil Éireann, which is the Irish Parliament, I suppose, or their equivalent of Congress. They had this, the Criminal Justice Incitement to Violence or Hatred and Hate Offences Bill, which had been in the works since 2022, and it was coming towards its sort of final stages. And there's lots of discourse here that you can have a look at, but I'm not going to bore you with. But what initially drew attention to it, you can take your pick which tweet is the origin point, but I think it's fair to say that one of these three is the origin point of the pushback, although they sort of helped each other a little bit. So this account, Free Speech Ireland, came out with this amendment and this is the People Before Profit. So if we hover over that, that's what that is, which is Ireland's largest eco-socialist organisation to include the UN Convention on Human Rights Protections on Free Speech within the hate speech bill has been defeated. So that sounds misleading. You think, okay, they're socialists. Well, they're trying to restrict speech on the right, of course. Well, actually, no. They were concerned about the effect of freedom of speech, which is a pleasant surprise. So it was too far even for them. And we'll see why in a second. And it says, as well as one to exercise this section allowing for the prosecution of individuals possessing offensive material without communicating it. And I think that this is one of the points of concern, is that you could have offensive material on a device that is against the law, not distribute it to anyone. It could potentially even be sent to you, say on something like WhatsApp. And you know how WhatsApp can sometimes automatically download pictures.
Yes.
It could be sent to you. You'd not notice the message. It'll be on your device, and you could be prosecuted for it. So
I'm constantly on sort of Islamist forums and looking around at what you guys are saying. For
research purposes.
Really, for research purposes. My only defense is that I have quite an eclectic collection, from the Shia jihadis to the Sunni jihadis to the Syrian guys and everything in between. So they all declare each other apostates, so I can't be a member of any one of them. That's going to be my defense when they arrest me for this.
I've got an extensive collection of communist literature, so I'm hoping that that's going to help me out.
No, I think that saves you, definitely. That's sort of, he's one of us.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm definitely going down for memes.
Yeah.
Meme Lord Luca, pray for him when he's in prison. But let's get to the post that I think started it off myself, although, of course, I don't mind if you pick that free speech one, which he is originally quoting here, but it was Keith's one that really took off. Ireland is about to pass one of the most radical hate speech bills yet. Merely possessing hateful material on your device is enough to face prison time. Not only that, but the burden of proof is shifted to the accused, who is expected to prove they didn't intend to use the material to spread hate, which of course is not innocent until proven guilty, is it?
Yes.
This clause is so radical that even the Trotskyist People Before Profit opposed it as a flagrant violation of civil liberties. Dark times. And of course, this was a little while ago. This was while it was going on. So this was on the 28th of April. So 2 days after that original tweet there. And he also shares parts of the bill and highlights the pertinent sections, which I think is always very important. And if people have objections to legislation, I think you should always do this. Like, outline this is the evil part, and sometimes the whole bill can be evil, of
right?
Course, but, so I'm going to read the two sections he's highlighted here. Prepares or possesses material that is likely to incite violence or hatred against a person or group of persons on account of their protected characteristics or any of those characteristics. And then it carries on to say, the person shall be presumed until the contrary is proved to have been in possession of the material in contravention of subsection 1, which is, I think, part of the one I just read. Right. Obviously, there's more to it.
Yes.
But obviously, this is awful. Of course, one of the main problems with hate speech legislation, other than the fact it's obviously used to weaponize in one political direction most of the time,
right,
is that it's so subjective in terms of, what is inciting violence. I mean, unless you have a very strict definition of you're explicitly calling people to be violent,
yes,
which I think is how most people understand it, but is not always applied that way. And also hatred. I mean, you can...
What does that even mean?
I know. Also, I can do... I can donate money to people out of hatred if I really want to. You know how sometimes there are fundraisers and you can add a little message. You can donate money to them and do it out of hatred, but technically you're giving them a donation. It's silly. Like this notion of you can also share things that are against hate crime law dispassionately. I imagine some of the statistics I've posted on X probably would meet the quota, but I did it dispassionately. In an analytical way.
Yeah.
No hatred in my heart, just passion for truth. But of course, this is ridiculous. We've talked about this a lot. This isn't necessarily the interesting thing. Of course, there's hate speech legislation. It shouldn't exist, but it does, and we know about it already. So, as is often the case, Elon Musk gave it a big boost by replying, saying this is a massive attack on freedom of speech. 3 million views, 96,000 people liking it.
How many did the original post have? 12 million.
Yeah, 12 million, 38. So it suggests that, okay, this platform does actually seem to be helping things. Obviously, I've got a plethora of criticisms of X, particularly the accounts that it boosts and how organic some of that is. And I think that it incentivizes low-quality stuff and some state propaganda. But that beside the point. There does seem to be an opportunity now, without people actively being persecuted by the left-controlled Twitter, for these sorts of posts to blow up. This is shortly after he was unbanned, I believe. And before I get on to the reaction, I do want to mention another reassuring beacon of light in the world, and that is Stelios, of course, and his course. He has a course called Introduction to Ancient Greek Virtue Ethics. He is Greek. He's telling you about ancient Greece. You can't get better than that. And the thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is on Thursday at 6 p.m., our time, British time, the best time, is your opportunity to put questions about his course and ancient Greek virtue ethics, Plato, Aristotle and the like, to Stelios. So if that interests you, you can go along and talk to him about ancient Greek wisdom. You will come away feeling enlightened, and especially if you sign up for the course. But anyway, back to current programming. There was a segment that aired on RTE, which, if you're not familiar with, is sort of Ireland's equivalent of the BBC, right?
Yes, state broadcaster.
Yes, it is. And the fact that Keith Woods, who, is an online commentator, can put something out on Twitter, Elon Musk replies to it, and then the state broadcaster basically reacts to it, because prior to this post, no one was really talking about it, as many legislation sort of goes under the radar unless you're paying attention to the parliamentary schedule of your respective country. Sometimes they can slip these things under the radar if people are not keeping their eyes on it.
Well, slipping things in is really their only tactic, given they know they have no mandate or consent for any of it that they do. It's all underhand, all the time.
But
Blair did that with the Gender Recognition Act.
With mass immigration.
And with mass immigration, yes.
So let's have a little listen to what they said, because it was surprisingly even-handed.
Ireland is introducing new incitement to hatred legislation. That's because the existing law is seen as ineffective. However, the new proposals have attracted criticism from at home and abroad. The new legislation criminalises communication or behaviour that's likely to incite violence or hatred against people because they're associated with a protected characteristic. It says those characteristics are Race, colour, penalty for an
Blah, blah, blah.
offence
We
will
get
be
the
up to
idea here.
But there's a clause which says people in possession of hate speech material without yet distributing it can also fall foul of the legislation. Billionaire Elon Musk tweeted the legislation is a massive attack on freedom of speech. And Donald Trump Jr. said it's insane what's happening in the free world.
Funnily enough, I don't.
We don't listen to him. But it's interesting to me that they're actively pulling up the posts now of prominent people. Of course, Trump Jr. saw it probably because of how widely it circulated and probably because of Elon Musk interacting with it. And so it suggests that there is some sort of amplifying mechanism in place that puts pressure on media organisations to talk about the pushback as well as the politicians themselves.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of reassuring, because beforehand I was so cynical. It's just like, yes, whatever happens online is basically worthless, and all you're doing is really making people angry about things that you can't change. But this seems to be an exception to that rule, which I'm pleasantly surprised to see. And it carried on to the point where there was more coverage of this. This was this gentleman who shall not be named because he does not dignify it, accusing...
And you can't pronounce it.
Yeah, that too. But it says... where was it? Ah, yes, here. The outgoing, leader...
I rest my case.
T-shirt. That's what it sounds like to my English ears. I'm sorry, Ireland. I say it with love. Said the party had buckled in the face of an online campaign of misinformation. But it's interesting that it's drawing it to the online sphere, isn't it?
Yes.
It's acknowledging that...
Misinformation being highlighting causes.
Yeah.
Highlighting the bill.
Obviously, the rhetorical techniques are not the sharpest, because when you highlight the parts of the bill that you take exception to, and they're objections from the far left and the right, it's a little bit of a tough sell.
They were generally more correct about these things than the centre.
I know.
Still time.
The centre so far is sort of my most hated part, just because of sheer contact with them. It carries on to say, Sinn Féin's spokesperson for Justice, Daly, said, has called for the bill to be ditched entirely, saying it was badly thought through and is not fit for purpose, despite the party voting the bill through in the Dáil last April, which is interesting. So it suggests that...
It's like a herd of sheep. I mean, they're told to vote, so they vote. They don't have opinions of their own. They don't have thoughts of their own. They're too dull to have them, because nobody interesting wants to be in politics because of the price that you have to pay to be in politics, which is that you're constantly smeared all the time.
But I think part of the reason he felt comfortable going out and saying, yeah, actually, I don't agree with this, despite my party doing it, is because there was this pushback. Right?
Yes.
You wouldn't stick your head above the parapet without the pushback, without that original post.
Yes.
And so it enables rebellion in the sort of world of politics. And there are other outlets pushing this as well. Here's the Irish Examiner. And this was later on in September rather than in April, saying... Minister for Justice Helen McEntee, confirmed on Saturday that parts of the hate speech bill that would make incitement to violence and hatred an offence would be removed. She said this was being done because the government could not get consensus on the proposed legislation. And then it goes down and talks about various people, but the first person it mentions is tech billionaire Elon Musk was among those who opposed the proposed laws which aim to modernise Ireland's legislation. Interesting term there, modernise.
Modernise, as opposed to sort of tighten the screws on dissent.
Around the hate-related crimes.
Uphold traditional liberties.
God forbid.
Obviously this is a bit loaded, but it is admitting that the online sphere did have some influence. And then there was this, coming back to closer to the modern day. This was May of 2025, so moving on a year or two now. Ireland given 2 months to begin implementing hate speech laws or face legal action from EU. Of course, this is part of the reason Britain left the EU.
What?
Yeah, I know. This is wild, isn't it? It's like, censor your politicians or we're coming for you. I mean,
Wow.
The EU didn't learn a damn thing from Brexit, did they?
oh no, it needs to be destroyed entirely. I
Yes.
hate it with a passion.
Yes.
It's
Not a
one of the most
single thing.
evil institutions in all of Europe, and that's saying something. So, where was I? I've lost where I was, but never mind. The point being that the EU was basically trying to blackmail.
Let me read this for you, please. Under existing EU rules on combating racism and xenophobia, the European Commission believes Ireland is allegedly failing to comply with laws first agreed to in 2008 surrounding the criminalization of race-based violence and hatred. How can you criminalize hatred? I don't understand. I mean, I accept that you could call it a sin, fair enough, because that's then between you and your conscience. But how do I read your mind and understand if you're simply reporting data accurately or are full of hatred?
Also, how do you select which groups this hatred applies to? Because I hate people who talk on loudspeaker on public transport, but no one's going to prosecute me for that. But if I point out which kinds of people are doing it, then they might.
Yes.
Interesting, isn't it? It's almost like the application of the laws is selective on purpose to target specific people.
Exactly.
But here he is. Recently, this is the actual new news from only a few days ago. When I was restored on here in April 2023, one of the first issues I highlighted was Ireland's hate speech laws. At that point, it had already passed our first house unopposed and looked an absolute certainty to become law. After the post below blew up with support from Elon Musk, it ignited a national debate on the bill in Ireland for the first time in its long legislative history. Eventually, the popular backlash became so great that the government dropped it just a year prior. No one even thought there was the possibility of this happening. Yesterday, the government pledged to ignore a demand from the EU to implement hate speech laws. This is a massive win for Ireland and everyone who played their part, pushing back against what would have been one of the most tyrannical speech bills in the West. Never let people tell you what we do here doesn't matter. And that's really reassuring and remoralising.
It is.
And of course, I would put some limits on this. I think that if the government wants to do something very unpopular, they probably still will do it. It depends on their political situation, how desperate they are to do it. And of course, Ireland, sometimes does butt its head with the EU anyway, so they're not necessarily afraid to oppose it. And so there are certain conditions where these sorts of things can exist. I don't know whether either of you can think of any others. So I don't want to just say it was because of this single tweet, but I think it at least was a significant factor. Yeah.
Oh. Didn't they make Ireland vote a couple of times until they got it right on the EU constitution?
That sounds about right, yeah.
They made the Dutch, I think, and the Irish vote again and again until they got the result that they wanted on an EU constitution. Then it failed anyway. Then they passed it as a treaty in 2008 or something like that. And I think in that constitution, they had a big fight with the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church was saying, look, you have to include some reference to Europe's Christian heritage as part of any founding document for how the EU should be. And the EU was like, no, absolutely not. We refuse to recognize the role of Christianity in building Europe. Okay.
What space is there for religion in a technocracy?
Exactly. The technocracy is the religion, right? Yes. So they keep on doing these anti-democratic things, but the online space does create some breathing room and some ability to strike back.
Well, you can tell, like when Elon at New Year last year, and started going hard on the group rape gangs and everything. And obviously now you've got Labour dragging their heels and going through the motions, but that forced them into a position where actually they had to at least start answering questions about it. Right? It forced a dialogue. It was like, no, you are going to address this.
And of course, this isn't the same as tangible results, but
no.
In a desperate situation, anything is better than nothing, right?
Yes.
So let's have a little listen to what they're actually talking about.
Reintroduce the hate speech legislation that was a dramatic failure in the last government and proposed by the previous Minister for Justice.
He basically said, we will not reintroduce. They cut off a little bit at the start.
Why the answer is no. I'm fairly satisfied that Ireland has transposed the European Council framework decision on combating certain forms and expressions of racism and xenophobia in a manner appropriate and tailored to the domestic system of law in Ireland. I want to assure members of the House that Ireland's position has been communicated to the European Commission And our position is that the framework decision is fully transposed in Irish legislation in a manner that is appropriate and tailored to Ireland's domestic system of criminal law and procedure.
So obviously this isn't ideal because, of course, there is still some hate speech legislation. It's the sort of vintage hate speech legislation, the sort of kind that we have in Britain, really. This is, of course, passed in 1989.
Aged like a bad wine.
It has, like vinegar. This is the Prohibition of Incitement to Hatred Act, which acts as a form of hate speech legislation, but it's not nearly as extensive as what they wanted to amend based on the EU's pressure. But it's interesting to me that they did push back against the EU and said, listen, we've already got something, so, leave us alone, basically.
We're already really unpopular. Do you want us in charge who are still sympathetic to the EU, or do you want something worse to come in?
And I think it should be said that this is a very old problem, that you had the Race Relations Act in this country in 1965. And then I think it was updated in 74 and in the 80s and the 90s. And it culminated in the two Equalities Acts under Blair and then under Brown, 2006 and 2010. So they've been sort of banning noticing for 2 generations now. And they've been restricting people's ability to think for themselves and say what they think for 2 generations now.
But seemingly not restricting their ability to actually notice.
And not
Right.
without...
The legislation doesn't actually stop you recognizing these things.
Yes.
It's an excellent example of the Streisand effect as well, because if we did have a truly free society, pointing out these things perhaps wouldn't be as fun for a start. And as sort of sensationalist and interesting to people, if it wasn't forbidden. And it's sort of like,
But I think
Firas,
you'll
sort of understand this, that
yes,
something being forbidden, the forbidden fruit.
makes it more tempting.
Exactly.
But there is also the sort of common good argument, which is for the good of the communities that are engaged in disproportionate amounts of bad behavior, rather than giving them the shield that says you are immune from criticism and anybody who criticizes you is guilty of hatred, saying honestly, look, there's a Pakistani rape gang problem, there's a black crime problem, there is a nepotism problem with other groups, and these need to be confronted, and that will allow peaceful coexistence more effectively. I think being honest about these things and being transparent about these things would remove some of the sources of tension and conflict if your intent is genuinely to have a more peaceful society. But if your intent is to subjugate one community and elevate others, then you need this kind of legislation. So the bad intent of the policymakers is baked in, or at least their short-sightedness.
Well, the interesting thing is as well that with these sorts of pieces of legislation, the ship has sort of sailed for most people with the integration argument, certainly for me, in that, I don't want integration anymore. I don't think it's actually possible. Looking at the data, looking at the evidence.
Not at all.
Not in those numbers. Not in those numbers. 1%, 2%, we can talk about it.
And also it depends where they come from,
20%?
right?
No. Yes.
I don't think someone from Somalia can come here and become just as British as you or I. Culturally, at least, they'll never be genetically British.
In Lebanon, we talk about the Armenia example. We had thousands and thousands and thousands of Armenians coming into the country. No problem at all. Very nice areas. It began as a slum, their area. Now it's actually quite prosperous, quite nice for the most part. Very decent. No conflict whatsoever. And we had the Palestinians. A bunch of civil wars, complete collapse in law and order, kidnapping, crime, da-da-da-da-da.
It's almost like not all people are the same.
It's as if values matter. It's as if different groups of people actually are genuinely different.
And you can't legislate yourself out of that problem.
And you can't legislate differences away. No. Not really. But at the very least, you can be honest about them. I mean, that's the first step.
Well, there's a rub.
Yes.
But I suppose I may as well call it here, but I think that this is an actual positive story that shows that you can have influence, and if you have a story that is worth international attention, you can put it out there and it can be picked up and it can have real world consequences, albeit rarely, but the fact it's possible should reassure you all that change is possible in the end.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's become apparent that there's something wrong with modern morality. There is something wrong with what we think in which the good life consists. And that's why I asked Stelios to write me a course on how to be moral. But we're also going to do a webinar where we answer questions. There'll be a Zoom call that you can get a link to. It'll be free. You just come, we'll put it up on the website. Just follow the link in the description. Come and join us. Like I said, it's going to be free. So we're just going to hang out and talk and explain exactly why this is so important. And if you want the course, the link is in the description, or go to courses.lotuses.com and pick it up there. And thanks for watching, folks.